Hey there. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. I'm Teresa Ferguson. I'm the Executive Director of Austin Up. Austin Up is a nonprofit that was formed in 2014 as a result of the Mayor's Task Force on Aging. And we work on issues related to the future of aging in Austin, and employment for 50 plus is definitely one of those issues. So we're very excited today to welcome a team from GSG Talent Solutions, including Keith Summer, who is their Senior Director. So Keith, take it away, introduce your team, and we're looking forward to the presentation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Teresa. Appreciate it. And we're so happy to be here with Austin Up and to talk about employment for people my age. So really excited to be here, really excited to introduce my team. So I'm going to share my screen here. Let's see right there. Can everyone see that? Yes, okay. So I am Keith Summer. I am the Senior Director of GSG Talent Solutions. I've been with GSG for 8 years. I took about a year and a half sabbatical, actually did something different work-wise, and then came back because I love that we're a nonprofit alternative staffing company that is mission-based. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But thrilled to be here, thrilled to be invited by Teresa and introduce my team, who is experts. They are experts in the field of recruiting, of resumes, of LinkedIn, and helping finding people jobs. So first and foremost, I'm going to hand it off, and I'm going to have Ricky introduce herself.
Hi everyone, my name is Ricky Santaella, and I have actually been recruiting with GSG for a little over 7 months now. And I was so excited for this opportunity and grateful to join such an awesome team. Before this, I have over 10 years of client management experience. So that is my knowledge that I'm going to be bringing to the table today.
Great, thank you, Ricky. And Sergio.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sergio Pellicano. I am one of the state recruiters here with GSG Talent Solutions. I have about 14 years of experience doing this, filling positions at state agencies, and I look forward to many, many more. And we're happy to be here today.
Great. Thank you, Sergio.
Thank you.
And last but not least, Ryan.
Good morning, everybody, or should I say good afternoon. It's a pleasure to see everybody. My name is Ryan Bullock, no relation to Sandra or Bob Bullock. I've been with Goodwill for close to 20 years in a variety of capacities: employment counseling, contract management, data analysis. I have certifications as a global career facilitator, which means I do job coaching, or I have done job coaching, and I'm also a certified staffing professional. And I look forward to talking to everybody today.
Great. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Ricky, and thank you, Sergio. And thank you again, Teresa, for inviting us today. So who is GSG Talent Solutions? Well, we are a nonprofit alternative staffing company. We are part of the Goodwill Central Texas umbrella. And what does that mean, really? I mean, what it means is that the business that we do with customers, the revenue that we generate, it goes back to serve our mission. And most people think of Goodwill and they think of the retail stores and donations. Well, Goodwill is so much more than that. We are a social enterprise that is committed to empowering people through education, career training, and work. And when I originally met Teresa and we were going through what GSG Talent Solutions was all about and what Goodwill was all about, I thought it was, she was fascinated and said, "You've got to share your story." So we were very excited to be invited here today and go through to talk a little bit more about Goodwill as a whole, but also how GSG Talent Solutions fits into that. Let's see here. Are y'all seeing, which version of the slideshow are y'all seeing?
We're seeing the presenters, so we see the next slide coming up too.
Oh, you do? Okay, I'm trying to figure out how to. Well, good. You get a preview because I can't figure it out.
If you maybe, Keith, can you hear me?
Yes.
If you maybe stop sharing the screen and then you pick the screen with the presentation on it, because I think you're using multiple monitors, that'll probably help.
Perfect. Thank you, Jenna.
I got you.
How about this?
Beautiful.
That's
Beautiful.
perfect.
Woo! It's nice to have a professional expert planted in the audience just in case of technical difficulties. Thank you, Jenna.
Gotcha.
So in talking about GSG Talent Solutions and how they fit with Goodwill Central Texas, this is an example of what our mission delivery model looks like. So when someone comes in for help, and someone can come into Goodwill for help for a number of reasons. I think there's probably perceptions of who would need Goodwill's assistance, but I've seen folks from every walk of life, from every age group, from every socioeconomic status, people with PhDs and people with degrees, people with a high school diploma. Life doesn't discriminate, and we all have challenges in our life and need organizations like Goodwill and others help sometimes. So when someone comes in and they go through intake, they then get assigned to a career case manager. That person kind of helps guide them in figuring out what they want to do. Do they need to go back to school for that? Maybe they need to get their high school diploma. Maybe they want to get a certification in something different than they've never done before. Or maybe they just need a little help with their resume and just connecting with employers. There could be all sorts of different needs that everybody has individual to them. Then once they go through that process, they are handed over to the business solutions placement team. That team does a job readiness assessment, and their job at that point is to help find that person a job. Now, it might be directly with a business out in our community, or it might be through a temp to perm model like GSG Talent Solutions. GSG Talent Solutions is the #1 customer for the business solutions team. And the business solutions team does work with other staffing agencies. They work direct with employers out in the community. But because of our partnership with the state of Texas and a lot of large employers in town like Dell, we've worked with Kendra Scott, we've worked with American Campus Communities, Circuit of the Americas. We've got a lot of different partnerships, both in the private sector and the state sector. Then once we are able to place someone into a job, that person goes to work, the revenue we generate from that goes back to fund the mission, and this whole cycle starts over again. So the wonderful thing about working not only for GSG as an employee, but as a customer partner is you're not only helping yourself and that person, but you're really helping the whole cycle, and you're going to help someone who you might never meet, or maybe you will. Maybe they'll get placed into a job with your company when they go through the process as well. So a little bit about our annual impact. Every year we serve more than 10,000 Central Texans. We place people into over 3,000 jobs. We enable people to graduate with a high school diploma. And I don't know if y'all know this, but years ago, the law was that if you're over the age of 25, you could not go back to school to get your high school diploma. You could get your GED, but not your diploma. So a lot of folks who dropped out due to life happening are not able to do that. Well, we lobbied, got the law changed, and we opened up the Excel Center, which is the only adult high school in the state of Texas. And we serve people between the ages of 25 and 50. They can go back, get their high school diploma, and really change the generational impact of what that does for their family. And you would not believe how many people we've had come through who do that, and then they go into college. And so it's been a really powerful, powerful part of our organization. We also have the GCTA, which is the Goodwill Career and Technical Academy. And in the GCTA, we have all sorts of different certifications at different levels. So we have a CNA program, a medical assistance program. We have a skilled trades program, an HVAC program, a CDL certification. We also have a project management certification. We're looking at some other high-level technical certifications that are going to be in-demand jobs that Texas Workforce Commission deems important in the workforce development plan for our area. And so we're really trying to create those opportunities and pathways to better your career, and if you choose to make a career change. Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, if you have questions while we're going, please put those in the chat so you don't forget them, and that way we can circle back at the end of the hour and we can answer those questions for you. So if you think of a question, just type it into the chat and we'll circle back and get you that answer. So you've heard me say it a few times, we're a nonprofit, alternative staffing, mission-driven organization. We work with temp to perm, or also known as contract or contract to perm. We do direct hire and contingent labor solutions. Some examples of our customers, already talked about a few of those. I guess I mentally got ahead of my slides in my head. We are the third largest staffing agency in the Austin area. A lot of people are very surprised at that. We've been in the top 10 for years. The year before we were 5th, so we've moved up 2 spots. Real proud of the team for making that happen, because every time we make that happen, it means we're helping more people go to work. We have 4 recruiters on our staff who've earned their professional staffing certification. So you're seeing one team here. We have a whole other team that works with our private placements as well. And then the money we generate from GSG Talent Solutions and other Goodwill business lines goes back to serving the mission. So one thing I didn't mention is we also have a whole other business line outside of retail, commercial services, where we do custodial and janitorial cleaning for not only the state of Texas, for various federal buildings and also private buildings in and around Central Texas. And we have a mail fulfillment business. So if you or your company has a large mailing project and needs, swag items put into a box and then mailed out, we do all that turnkey for you at the GCC, which is at 1015 Norwood Park Boulevard, which is also where our office is. So yeah, that's a little highlight of what Goodwill and GSG Talent Solutions are all about. And now I am going to pass this off to Mr. Ryan Bullock and let him take over on resume tips.
All right, thank you for passing the microphone. So I'm going to talk about resumes a little bit. There is just so much you can say about resumes. If you ask 100 people about resumes, you'll get 100 different opinions. What I like to do is I like to talk about best practices, and I've tried to lay down a framework for how to think about resumes. Hopefully some of what I'm going to tell you is common sense, and it's just going to reaffirm what you already know. If that's not the case, hopefully you can take this to heart and implement it with your resume when you're trying to sell yourself. But the first thing I have to say about a resume, I generally tell people it's a 10-second rule. Working in recruiting, you're going to get a lot of resumes, especially for the competitive jobs. You have to sell yourself in 10 seconds that you're a good fit for the job that you're applying for. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of this as we go on. But purely, it's a screening tool. When you think about the job search itself, you find an ad online. They'll say, submit, a resume. A resume is a screening tool. They look at that. If they're interested enough, they take you to the next phase. So you don't have to do everything with your resume. The only thing you really have to do with your resume is garner enough interest to where people want to ask more. And I make that point because sometimes people like to think of resumes as like a curriculum vitae. It's the biography of somebody. No, it's a 10-second sales pitch for a particular job that you're applying for. And so I try to make sure people understand that. Some other points to mention: it represents you when you're not there. I try to convince people when you're doing resumes as much as you can, you want to quantify accomplishments. And so, this is making, it's almost like SMART goals. You want to make sure you can say that you did good, but if you can actually acquire some statistics and throw a number behind it, it just quantifies it, makes it a little bit more real. 35% increase in outcomes, or even if the number is just years experience, having a quantity makes you a stronger sell. There's all sorts of different styles and formats. I'll touch on some of the basics on the formats in a little bit, but I'll also talk about common areas where people make mistakes. So I'm assuming most people here have a resume and they just want to tune it so that it sells them a little bit stronger. And the last thing I'll mention on this slide is there's a website called Entry, which Goodwill, our workforce advancement department, just got a license for, and they use it in their case management services. It's a tool, and actually you can either, if you ever wanted to use this, by the way, you could, if you qualify, you can actually go into our intake program and get plugged in that way. If you want to do it on your own, I believe it's, I forget what the cost is, maybe $40 to use it. But what it does, it has an algorithm. And so it takes a little bit of work. You're going to be plugging in some information. It's going to have a repository of your data. You're going to plug in job descriptions, and it's going to use an algorithm based on your job description and what you have on your resume, and it's going to match and give you recommendations on what needs to be added in order to match that job description. So it's really interesting. Whenever I've given resume presentations before, we always talk about the algorithm that the HR systems use. Well, this is actually the reverse of that. This is actually getting an algorithm on your side before it actually goes to any HR or recruiting department. So I did want to touch on that, and you can certainly ask me more questions as we go along. And so just to touch base on the core purposes of the resume, it represents you when you're not there. Obviously, this is a digital representation of yourself. You upload it to job boards, that gets shared. Oftentimes recruiters will use like metadata bases where it gets, you plug it into one and it gets shared with others. So you want to make sure that it represents what you can do. Depending on the type of job you're looking for, if you're working in accounting, let's say, and you've done accounts payable, there's a lot of generality from job to job for accounts payable. There's other jobs where you really have to niche, and show that you have especially if you're in the software industry. Whenever you're uploading to job boards, you're going to have a little bit more of a general resume. When you apply for a specific company, it gives you the chance to really fine tune it. And so I do try to convince people, fine tune your resume, match it to the job, make it a one-for-one kind of match. Because again, you're going to get through that algorithm, people are going to be interested, and you're more likely to get that call back. It quantifies your accomplishments, just like I touched on before. You want to make sure that you have some percentages or numbers behind what it is that you've done. Because again, it makes what you've done a lot more real than you just saying that you did good, Next slide. It clearly states what your abilities are. Oftentimes, in the employment world, there's KSAs, there's knowledge, skills, and abilities. And you want to make sure that you're actually selling hard skills. Oftentimes, and this happens primarily with younger people, they put down things that are unquantifiable. They put down personality characteristics. What you really want to put down is your hard skills. It's not so much about, good customer service. It's more about maybe if you had to do customer service, years of the customer service, outcomes with customer service. But you want to make sure that you have hard skills. So more knowledge. And so with knowledge, skills, and abilities, knowledge is what you know in your head. Skills is what you've done. Abilities is what you have the capability to learn oftentimes. You want to make sure that you state what it is, that's going to be a good fit, what you can do, what you bring to the table. It creates talking points. And so when you submit your resume and the recruiter gets it, oftentimes when you're sitting down and you're being interviewed, what they're going to do is they're going to crack out that resume. They're going to hold it in front of themselves and ask you, so tell me about X, Y, and Z, whatever's on your resume. So this gives you a chance to actually push to the forefront stuff you want to talk about. This gives you a chance to brag. And let there be no mistake. You want to brag when you're doing an interview. You want to brag when you're doing a resume. There's not the time to be humble. Because again, it's a competitive job process. And again, we talk about like using numbers, using percentages, having something to quantify the skills that you're talking about. Next slide. It proves your worth to your past employers. So obviously when somebody sees your resume, you want them to feel that, boy, this employer really missed out when they lost Keith Summer because this guy was talented. Also, it demonstrates what you can do for a future employer. So one of the rules that you learn in human resource management is the best indicator of future performance is past performance. And so obviously, if you're applying for a job and you've got those job skills and you're really selling it, that's what they're going to want to see. They want to see that you have the job skills that you've done in the past that match their job. Types of resumes, this is just by way of review. There's advantages to each of these types. So for somebody, let's say, who's done accounting type work, let's say they were in accounts payable, and they've done it for a good number of years, chances somebody in that area is going to go chronological. It's just going to go just like it sounds like. It's going to go from most recent experience down to more past experience. Chronological is used when you have a body of knowledge where there's a certain consistency with it as you go through time. Another type is functional. Functional is used more for either job seekers who are just entering a job field or somebody who's like switched careers maybe. So a functional type of resume, instead of going from most recent to most past, a functional is you're actually going to take a look at that job description of the job that you're applying for, and you're going to take a look at the 5 most important things in that job description, and you're going to base your resume on that. And so let's say it has, let's say you haven't done project management before in a job, but let's say you've done project management volunteering. You could put down project management, and then you could talk about things that were unrelated to your employment. Because again, with the resume, you're trying to sell that you've done it before, not necessarily that you got paid for it. And so functional is one style. And then very commonly, people will combine the two formats, which is just like it sounds like. Each resume is tailored as much as you can to the job that you're applying for. And so there might be things that you really want to highlight up top like you would with a functional. But that's a very as needed kind of situation. Next slide. All right, so one thing that sometimes people miss out on when it comes to resumes is they miss out on really targeting the skills that they have to offer. So one thing you want to do is you want to think about your career goals, your strengths and weaknesses. You want to identify the skills that you've got that are in the job description. If you go to the next slide, it'll lay this out. Oh, it doesn't. Okay. So if you can go back one slide, I'm sorry. So with the skills analysis, what might happen is, let's say that your job is a project manager. So a project manager is what you did. It was your job title. So you're going to want to take a look at that time that you worked as a project manager and then break down the skills associated with it. So if you think about being a project manager, you're going to have a skill of leadership. You're going to have a skill of organization. You're going to have a whole host of other skills. You're going to take those skills and you can break them down a little bit more. It gives you something to put in your resume. Sometimes, all too often, people will just rely on a job title. You want to break down that job title into its component parts of what makes you good at that job. And so skills analysis, look at what you've done, break it down into bite-sized portions that you can put into your resume. Next slide. So I'm going to talk about just a couple more items. This is another common mistake. Oftentimes people will have just very basic verbs like completed, did, responsible for. Those are very passive, and they oftentimes don't give a very good account of what you did. So what I try to convince people to do is to use action verbs. And if you Google, you can find just a whole host of like action verbs online to better explain what it is that you've done in the past. Can you move to the next slide? Okay, here we go. Some examples of action verbs. So here's the example where I talked about led. You know, there's different ways of leading a project. You could have chaired a project, you could have controlled it, you could have coordinated it. Maybe the way that you oversaw the project was by, you know, starting it. You were the leader of it, you were the founder. Other times the way that you oversaw a project is you just like maintained like administrative, you know, kind of capability. Again, I'm trying to get you to think about deeper when you're doing resumes. You know, get away from those common words and try to use action verbs that actually kind of explain what it is that you've done. Not only does it explain what you did, but it also makes it much more dynamic. And again, when you're doing resumes, you don't have to be the best person in the world. You just have to be better than the 10 other people who've applied for that job. And all of these things kind of help push you a little bit higher. So there's some other examples here. Instead of creating a project, administered, built, chartered, designed. Instead of saving, if you save the company time or money, again, there's additional action verbs that you can use as well. Reconciled, yielded, conserved. Again, just making it more dynamic. And move on to the next slide. So we have a couple more examples here. And again, you can Google all of this or you can contact me if you want more information, but increased efficiency. There's some more examples here: amplified, boosted, capitalized. You also want to think about what the jargon is for the industry that you're applying for. You want to make sure that your action verbs match that jargon. You changed or improvised something. So instead of on your resume, we changed this. Again, you want to customize, you want to rehabilitate if the company was doing really bad and you got them back up. Same thing with restructured, transform the company. Does that make sense? Try to avoid passive language when you're doing a resume. You want to be as dynamic as possible. With that, I'll go ahead and turn this over to our next presenter.
Ryan, thank you very much for that very valuable information. And don't mean to ride on your coattails, but I just want to add a couple of things as far as resumes goes. And it's going to kind of jump around from how I have things set up on this slide. But one thing that I do like to tell people when I'm when I'm talking resumes with them is, and the reason for this, sometimes I think that a skills-based or a functional resume can be kind of hard to come up with, especially I know growing up and going to school, they really do teach you that chronological resume. So when you get to the point where somebody's telling you that they want you to use a functional resume or a skills-based resume, it's kind of hard to come up with one. So what I tell people to do, or what I recommend, is use the internet. Just do a Google search on skills-based resume. Give it a try. It's going to pull up a bunch of examples of what a skills-based or a functional resume looks like. And then not only will there be examples of that type of resume, but there will also be templates that you could use, that you could just take that and then you populate. You use your information, and it can also give you ideas on how to compose the content in your skills-based resume. Okay, so now with that out of the way, I want to touch really quickly. I do not want to spend a lot of time talking about workintexas.org. So step one, the reason I like to mention Work in Texas is because if you are interested in employment at the state, that's going to be the gate right there. That is going to be the first thing you have to do. You've got to get that profile in. I know that some people might have some difficulty navigating through that system, but like I said, we're not going to get into that right now. It's just something that really has to get done, because the other reason I'm mentioning this is because we primarily recruit for state agencies or temporary assignments at state agencies. So at some point, if we do send you on a temporary assignment at a state agency and you're there for 3 months, 6 months, and then they end up wanting to hire you permanently, that's something that you're going to have to address at some point. So later on in the presentation, Ricky, she is going to go over social media, Indeed and ZipRecruiter. Those are very valuable tools in the job search. And again, it's kind of like work in Texas where you go, this is kind of difficult to use. So she'll touch on that briefly later on. Okay. Oh, and the other thing that I do want to mention about resumes is I always recommend people to have more than one version. And the reason for that is we have different kinds of jobs. Jobs are always coming in. Sometimes we have things that may not necessarily be in your field. So you want to have what I call a general admin resume. And then if you want to have something that is a little closer to your field, let's say you've been an accountant for many, many, many years, and that's just your field. So if we have something that is in accounting, you've not only got your general resume, if we can send you on a general admin job, just so you can get working, just so you could get your feet off the ground, you can also have that resume that's ready for your field, your skill set. All right, so some of these things that I've been mentioning have been job search tips as they relate to the world of temporary staffing. So that's kind of why I'm leaning in that direction, because that's who we are and what we do. We are a temporary staffing agency. All right, so I tell everybody, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And the reason I say that is because there's a lot of people that they come to us and they don't want to talk to any other agency out there, and then they don't look at other ways of finding work. So tell people, hey, you want to expand your horizons, you want to expand your search, cast the net wide. Okay. The other thing that I tell people is, because jobs are always coming in almost on a regular basis, is to communicate your availability on a weekly basis. It doesn't necessarily even have to be on a weekly basis. It could be once a week, twice a week, or even every other week. That's going to depend up to you. I know other agencies out there will ask people to call in every single day at 8 a.m. I'm not going to do that because that's a lot of volume. So what I tell people to do is just check in on a regular basis. It doesn't even have to be on a set day. And what I do is I ask people to write what's called an availability email. That's the easiest way for me to manage all of that. And then it's also a chance for you to practice your follow-up. So I even created a template. And if you want to get with me later, I can share that template. And I think that is all I have for now. Does anybody have any questions in the chat? Let's check the chat really quickly before we move on. Awesome. All right. With that, I will go ahead and pass it on to Ricky.
Awesome. Thank you, Sergio and Brian, for all that useful information. So I'm often asked, does LinkedIn really matter, and do employees check it? And yes, we do. I do often look at LinkedIn just to kind of get, more information about candidates. And according to AARP, when it comes to landing a job, the best way to get as much attention as possible from recruiters and hiring managers is to keep both your resume and your LinkedIn profile up to date, as 77% of recruiters use LinkedIn to find candidates. And so, essentially LinkedIn is a very useful career tool to use. And I like to think of LinkedIn as kind of a personal sales page, as you will. And so I want to give you guys, just a couple of tips to help maximize your LinkedIn profile, just to make sure that you are showing up in searches, as it is a search engine for employers. So my number one tip is to make sure that you're inside your settings, you are open to opportunities, as this indicates to employers that you're looking for work and you are open to, hearing about new roles that a recruiter might have that you fit the bill for. My second tip is to utilize your headline to show up in searches. So LinkedIn, again, is a search engine for employers and recruiters to use. And so I would, in my headline, use keywords that are associated with the role that you want, as it will help recruiters find you more easily. The first thing that's going to jump out to a recruiter when they visit your LinkedIn profile is going to be that headline, which is right underneath your name and your profile picture. And then my third tip is to make sure to have a very clear professional photo, as that is, something that is important. It kind of gives a face to the name. It's a way for people to, get a good picture of you and see you. And you know, sometimes when people don't have photos, they sometimes just don't get calls back. And it's just a good way to kind of just elaborate on what they already have, which is your resume. So the only person in the photo should be you, and I would avoid any sort of distracting backgrounds. I would also suggest to wear something professional, like you might wear to work in this profile photo, and make sure the picture is recent and does look like you, and just as clear, and just something where 60% of the photo is just of you. And you can go to the next slide, Key. Thank you. Tip number 4 is your about section. I always suggest to write a summary of how you got to where you are today, your accomplishments, and what essentially makes you passionate. If you're switching careers, only talk about the new career in this section. I would only talk about the skills you have been building and why you might love that certain industry that you now have made a switch to. You can also use this portion of LinkedIn to reference any personal projects in your field. So, remember, this is just a sales page for you to be able to showcase the value you add to the world. Your LinkedIn summary is your chance to tell your professional story. And my tip number 5 is your experience section. Put accomplishments that are on your resume. So your resume bullet points can go into this experience section, but you can also put descriptions about the company that you worked for, and maybe a couple added narratives. Pro tips, you can actually link work samples and images of awards or certificates that you've obtained over the years. So you can use that media portion of LinkedIn to link those work samples that you might otherwise not have room for on your resume. And then a bonus tip is at the very bottom of your LinkedIn profile, there is a skills and endorsement section. And here I like to suggest to people to use this section as a way to add those skills that you're targeting. So I would look up a job description, grab a few skills that are listed in that job description, and add those on your skills and endorsement page, as that will better help you show up in searches. Again, as this is a search engine for recruiters and employees to find you. And then lastly, I have linked a couple of videos on YouTube that are very helpful for you to reference if you want to, go step by step with people who are giving tips and tricks on how to maximize your LinkedIn profile. And that is it for my portion.
Thank you, Ricky and Ryan and Sergio. Really appreciate all that information. And I know one of the questions in the chat was, will these slides be available for us after the presentation? And the answer is yes. And I know that Teresa is recording this, and so we will be able to send those out for y'all to have those as a resource. And we will provide our contact information as well. So if you do want to reach out to Sergio or Ryan or Ricky or myself, that you'll be able to do that. One of the things I did want to just kind of wrap up, and then we'll get into the Q&A, is our relationship with the state of Texas has been around since, I believe, 1995. And we work with about half the agencies at the state, Department of Health and Human Services, the Attorney General's Office, TxDOT, many, many more. And we have positions of all levels and professions. So, and they come and go. So we don't always have an attorney position open, but we do sometimes. We don't, and biochemists. Right now there's a lot of people in the medical field that are needed. So they vary, and that's why Sergio says always be checking your availability and checking and reaching out and letting him know, or Ricky know, what that looks like. And then, of course, on our private staffing, we've got various jobs at different levels there as well. And our goal long-term is, Sergio mentioned we're a temporary agency. We're a temporary agency with the hope and dream that you go temp to perm. So the goal is that it's a gateway to permanent employment. Sometimes the state, just due to budgets, won't be adding new permanent full-time positions, so they keep someone as a temporary worker. We have some people that have been with us for years. And I mean, we know them, they're our employees. We know them really well. So just keep that in mind as well. So now let's, I guess let's go. Teresa, do we have some questions in the chat that we can answer?
I think that a couple of them were already answered, but one of them, Diana asked a question about what kinds of jobs do you have for mature professionals? So let me piggyback on that question to say, so if an experienced professional comes into your office, you know, to get into your system or to inquire, so what's the next step? What happens during that first meeting?
Can I go ahead and take this?
Sergio? Yep.
Okay. Well, the first step is obviously meeting with the recruiter, whether it's, you know, a phone conversation or in person. But the way things have been lately, we've been on the phone a lot with people, and that's okay. After that conversation comes an onboarding. So we always try to get to know you and your skill set, because as it has been said, things come and go, and it's always a variety of stuff. It could be anything from a CPA or a biochemist or an attorney or a receptionist or anything really, anything in the admin, professional, clerical spectrum, we will probably have at some point at any given time. So that's why we really, really encourage people to develop that relationship with your recruiter, whoever it is that you're dealing with on a regular basis. I like to tell people that checking in regularly, it's important. It really gives you a chance to practice your follow-up. That availability email, it's kind of like an elevator pitch in writing. So that's kind of how I like to think about it, because our world, it can change on a regular basis every day. So I hope that makes sense.
No, that does. Another question, and I think maybe it was Ryan who mentioned the putting the quantity of years of experience, you know, up front and center on your resume. And a lot of older adults are reluctant to do that for fear of being pigeonholed and saying this person has too much experience. So what is your feeling about that? How can we remedy that situation?
It's a good question, which typically means people don't have a good answer. But in this case, I like to think that I do. There is a certain amount of judgment that comes into play. When I did employment counseling years ago, you know, there's certain skills that are, when you think of older workers, typically you'll think of people who have like more hard skills. And so, I mean, obviously you're going to want to sell those hard skills because they actually have like knowledge and skills, as opposed to the ability to like pick it up. I mean, they can pick it up, but that's what you're selling, right? It really depends on what you know about the company. I know that sometimes if people are concerned about like over-representing, like maybe they could put just like over 5 years experience or over 10 years experience, rather than saying, I don't know, 40 years experience, if somebody was worried about that, right? I mean, you have a certain latitude because the resume is a sales pitch and you share as much as you want to share. As far as like what to put down, if you're concerned about it, I would probably lean towards like over X amount of experience. It also probably, if it's a needle in a haystack kind of job where you're actually spending a lot of time and energy on one job, it's also worth doing some research to find out what the organizational culture is. Sometimes that can be very difficult if it's just an online job and you don't have an inside source. But they do have websites like Glassdoor where you can find people who've actually talked about working at companies. But to answer your question more succinctly, if you're worried about it, yeah, over X number of years. I've also had people ask me about like when they're putting their like college graduation or their high school, you know, do they want to include the years there? Typically, when it comes to education, typically they're at the bottom of the resume and they're kind of pre-qualifiers that I have a degree. And in those cases, you could leave off the years of your university. It's more about you having a university degree. Sometimes you have certifications. Certifications, you know, you have a lot of wiggle room. High school, you can leave off the year if you want to. I don't know. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, you did. You did.
I've got a follow-up, Ryan.
Yeah.
So another thing that has always been debated over and over again, and especially for seasoned adults like myself, whose resume could fill 4 pages, most recruiters want a 1-page resume.
Mm-hmm.
Even 2 pages nowadays is sometimes too much. And I've also heard that when you've been in the workforce for 25 plus years, jobs over 10 years old should just fall off, and you should take the skills and put them in your functionality. But
Mm-hmm.
should we let those drop off, or should we just line them?
No. If you have the skills to do something and it's relevant to the job that you're applying for, you're going to want to include it on the resume. I wanted to go back to the first thing that you made reference to, which is, I've actually had this before. Engineers are the worst. My apologies to any engineers on the call. I have gotten resumes that are 10 and 12 pages long. Unknowingly, what they sent me was a curriculum vitae. So a curriculum vitae is typically used in academia, and it lists in detail, it's almost like the encyclopedia about the person involved. And it's not a bad thing to have a curriculum vitae, because you can actually take bits of that and you can squeeze it down. And so to get into the second part of your question, Keith, ideally, you'll want to make a resume 1 page. You do that by looking at the job description and make sure that you're just selling what it is that you've got that fits that job description or fits that industry. But if you had to go over 1 page, it's okay if you have the job skills if missing that second page would take away. So typically, if you're submitting a 2-page resume, it's not for a simple job. It's for a job that generally requires a lot of knowledge, skills, and abilities. And so for most of the group here, I would say 1 page is ideal, but if you went into 2 pages, that's okay. As long as you're selling what the employer wants to see. And I'll turn it over.
Another question. So I think, Keith, you mentioned the Work in Texas website. So if we come into your office and there is a job at the state that we might be a fit for, can we fill out, is the first step then to fill out an application at the Work in Texas, or fill out a profile on the Work in Texas website?
So let's, I think Sergio mentioned that. Let's let Ricky or Sergio answer that one.
Okay, so it's going to depend. If it's a position that we have within our agency, that's not a requirement that you have a Work in Texas profile. It's something that I always encourage, because at some point you may be offered a permanent position by a state agency, that's the end goal, really. Our whole mission is to put people to work, and if people aren't getting hired, then well, there you go. So when people come into our agency, that's not something that we're going to do. We're not going to sit down and build a profile and look at your Work in Texas. It's just something that I guide people to, something that I encourage them to do, but we don't touch that. And the same thing goes for, and it's kind of the same thing, but a state application. Sometimes people send me the state of Texas application, and for one individual who just retired from a state agency and she worked there for 30 years, she never had a resume because she's just basically been working there her whole adult life. And here she is, retirement age, but she wants to go back to work because she's young enough to go back to work. So they don't have a resume. So what does she do? She brings me her state of Texas application. I can use that. I can certainly use that to look at their skills, to look at what they've done, what they've accomplished at all the jobs that they've done in the state. But the only thing that I can't do is send a resume to a potential hiring manager at one of my agencies. So it really is important to have a resume. And if you don't have one, what we can do is refer you to our workforce advancement division, and they could sit down with you and provide those kinds of services free of charge.
That's great to know. Are there other questions?
I've got one. Eric Hungate here.
Hey, Eric.
Hi. Well, a couple things. Number one, I want to shout out to Austin Up and to Teresa, having worked with them in the past and still feel an affinity. I'm glad to see you guys again. And if you folks that are on the call don't know much about Austin Up, do take some time and check it out, all the things that are going on, because a lot's going on. And this is a great example of one. This is personal to me as well, because I work closely with Ricky. She's my confidant, counselor, and shrink sometimes, depending on the call. But it's good. One of the things that I thought that GSG was very good at was really trying to get to the personality and the fit. When we first chatted, you know, and she looked at my resume and kind of interviewed me for a position that I'm currently in right now. It was a real nice back and forth conversation, and having that relationship with the rep versus sometimes going to an Indeed or Dice or Glassdoor, you're really going in and you may not hear back. A lot of times you don't hear back at all, which is problematic. But having a representative in your corner and a recruiter that you can talk to, they do give you feedback that's very valuable and can help shape, you know, your future submissions for jobs, et cetera. One example is when we were talking, there were a number of jobs open at the state. And when I heard them, they, you know, having been a manager for years and been in IT for years, that some of them felt like, well, I'm going from one level to, you know, starting all over again at something else. And so we were able to talk through and find a position for me that was as working as an IT liaison for what's called the LIDS division in the Department of State Health Services. And when I first heard it, LIDS is Laboratory and Infectious Disease Section. And so with COVID out there, I thought, what, you know, what would that mean? But what I'm doing now currently is really helping tracking the immunizations, getting providers approved so that they can get their allocations to get the shots out. And it really is, it's got a fantastic mission to it. And I'm really enjoying it. It's really an effort that sometimes I work 7 days a week, depending on what's going on. So it's intense, but very good. And I would highly recommend them. I pitch, you know, Sergio, I haven't had time you and I chatted a little bit over the time I've been involved, but anyway, just wanted to do a shout out to everybody, because both Austin Up and GSG recruiting are top notch. So thank you. Good for you.
Thank you so much for that, Eric. I appreciate the feedback.
Absolutely.
And so I guess you guys have full-time and part-time positions. Is that correct?
Well, and I can let the recruiters dig in a little bit deeper, but actually most of our positions are full-time positions. We occasionally will get a part-time position, but a lot of people, it's a misnomer that temporary jobs are part-time jobs. They're not. They're usually full-time positions, 40 hours a week, and they're looking for someone who can show up and be there doing the work.
Good to know. Are there other questions, or maybe you want to share a story about your job search? We'd love to hear your experience.
Everyone's muted, so make sure you unmute before you talk.
That's right.
All right.
Well, I think this has been wonderful. Thank you so much, team at GSG Talent Solutions.
Thank you very much, too.
This has been
Yes.
great. And I want to say, yes, we are recording, and So I will get the slides and your contact information and then a link to the recording, and we'll send that out to everyone who is registered, definitely. And I want to remind you that our next presentation, Austin Up does, where our goal is 2 per month presentations about the job search for older adults. Our next presentation will be on February 25th, and it'll be, the topic is moving from a staffer to a contractor. So a lot of people are, are looking for jobs and may have decided, instead of staffing up at a company, to do something on a contract basis. So what does that mean for taxes? What are the success factors for being a good contractor? So that's what we'll cover on that presentation. So you'll find out more at austinup.org. Okay. All right, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, everyone. Stay
Thank you all.
warm.
Stay warm is right.
Yes,
Be
okay.
careful. Bye-bye.
Bye.